for it all. The Rambo. Oh, stands for the interception by Kenny Moore. Toss it over the middle. Intercepted by the Colts.
Good morning. I got to get used to this. It's good evening, Colts Nation.
Yeah, it's definitely not morning, Steven.
I know. I get thrown off. I've said it for like 8 months. So good evening. Welcome back to another episode of the No Horsing Around podcast. Again, like we said earlier this week, we are just two dudes, but we are joined by a third dude who, if you have no clue who he is, you are not tapped into Colts Nation. You're not tapped into the Colts podcast, Colts Twitter, whatever it is. We are joined by Cody Felger from Bring the Juice. Cody, thank you so much for coming in here today, man.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me. Appreciate the invite.
Well, we couldn't not do it. I mean, it's cut down day, you know?
Yeah.
So we're going to delve into all this information. We're going to go over kind of some of the breaking news that we've had over the last 24 hours, 48 hours. We're going to get opinions, kind of go over all of it. But before we get into that, I ask you guys, like always, please rate, review, subscribe, share, hit that lovely subscribe button on the YouTube page. I think our goal we had set this week was to try to be at 350. I think as of right now, we're at like 352, somewhere around there, which is insane. Thank you guys so much. We're so happy about that. We don't hesitate, right, Zach? Like, we kind of just jump right in. I think, what better way to start than obviously with just kind of the COVID news, the updates, reactions. I want to get kind of what you guys think. I want to hear you, Zach. I want to hear you, Cody. Let's start with Carson, Kelly, Pascal, and the COVID list.
Yeah, man. Just one of those things I think we're probably going to have to deal with all year long. And Frank Reich said it, he's into having, these long-term relationships. He doesn't want these short-term things. And it is frustrating, right? It's frustrating for us. I know there was a huge debate and article that came out with Greg Doyle this week. On this podcast, we're not getting into all of that, but, that was a really, really kind of a controversial thing. But that being said, something we're going to have to deal with all year long. We just don't know what's going to happen. We don't know how the COVID's going to play, this close contact type of deal. But good news is it's happened early on. It's kind of going to be out of the way. Sounds like Carson gets a chance to be back tomorrow, or actually should say Thursday. And that's going to affect the roster. Like, this is such a crazy 53-man because, like, things are going to change so fast and evolve with the waiver wire and then the COVID list and then the injuries. You're going to have so many different layers, and I think that's what makes this year so unique compared to the years past, because you've got all of these different variables that are going to determine how this football team is going to be constructed when it's all said and done. I'm interested in Cody's just instant reactions, kind of how he sees it as far as COVID plays and translates into the season, and just this general thought of the 53-man roster.
Yeah, definitely. It's like, as a Colts fan, we can't have a break, it feels like. It's like, positive news for less than a week, then something else happens. It never fails, man, and it's just sometimes it gets a little frustrating. It's just like, seriously, can we not just have an off season without 1,000 things going on, So
yeah,
but yeah, I think you're right, Zach. I think you hit it on the head there. I think this is going to be something that's going to be, unfortunately, just a part of the NFL season. And we all know, regardless of what your opinion is on vaccinations and stuff, like, the fact is the Colts are one of the lower teams that are vaccinated. So, like, this is going to be something that's going to be, even if, none of the players that were quarantined, I don't think they had it. It was a coach. So it's just the close contact thing that it's kind of like, well, you know what? Like, the players know, what the coaches are recommending and stuff. And they know, like, hey, if we choose not to, like it's going to impact our football team. Like regardless of how you feel about it personally, I think it's just a reality and you have to live in it, you have to live with it. And so I get in a sense why fans are frustrated because it's just like, why is this going to keep happening? Why don't we do something about it? And so I get both sides of it for sure. So yeah, it's going to be something. Unfortunately, I think it's going to be another year of having to deal with this. And that's just kind of how it is, unfortunately.
Yeah. I mean, I know for me kind of seeing it, like, I feel I'm very similar. I'm very similar to you, Cody. Like, I feel like it's going to be something that we're just going to deal with. It's going to be similar to last year, and we're going to kind of have to see how things break out. I think one of the most frustrating things for me was not the close contact. It was kind of this massive jump to conclusion that everybody had on what it was, and it was like, give it time to breathe. Let's see. Everyone's assuming he's tested positive. It's a close contact, all these different things. And then I think for me, and we've not gotten into any of the COVID stuff outside of who's going on the list, but for me, I was slightly disappointed a little in the attack, specifically kind of when it came to Carson Wentz and his character by a lot of people because of it, like the Greg Doyle article, stuff like that. Like, it's just Indy fans, like, we're better than that. We're not Philly fans. We don't need to react that way. So I mean, it was a little disappointing to see that. But the other thing, me and Zach were talking about, and Cody, you overheard a little too, is I feel like I've also been trying to figure out when Carson is actually coming back, because I've heard everything from, we've heard Thursday, we've heard Friday, we've heard 5 days, I've heard like 4 days. Like, it's very confusing, and the Colts obviously have every right, and they're not doing it, of giving specifics. But I'm very interested to see, because all the talk now too is, will he get enough practice time? So before we get off of this, that's a question I have for the two of you guys is, let's say he is out till Friday, and he gets Friday and then he gets next week. Is that enough practices for him to be all go in your mind for week one?
So I say yes. I know it's difficult anytime that you're going through this rehab process, and it really doesn't matter what I think. Frank Reich's kind of the judge, jury, executioner when it comes down to this, but he's a veteran. He knows the system in general. Obviously there's a few more, nuances to Frank Reich's, Indianapolis offenses versus being in Philadelphia. But you got to think about, Carson Wentz gives us the best chance to win. Even with just fewer practices, I think he gives us the best chance to win. I would have a hard time believing if he comes back this Thursday that he's not your week one starter. Now barring any other COVID outbreak, or I don't really know all of the deals that and the nuances with COVID. What is close contact? I mean, if anybody in that building gets it, is that close contact? I just don't know that specific part of it. So it's going to be a day by day, week by week basis. But I'm just going to say yes. I think he's the week one starter if he comes back this week and he can practice. Where you at?
Yeah. I do too. I do wonder, because the Colts don't practice Friday. They don't practice till Monday. Thursday is their last day. So I wonder, like, I don't even know if this is the thing they can do, but like, is it possible to maybe like have, Friday and be able to have Carson Wentz put together back-to-back days? Again, I don't know if that's even a thing that's possible. I was talking with one of the Indy Star reporters about that, and I was like, that's an interesting concept, because that's kind of the next step, is seeing Carson Wentz on 11-on-11s, putting back-to-back days on each other. But yeah, I think going back to your point, I think he will. I think the biggest thing is just like, they want to make sure he's not injured. They want to make sure he's 100%. If he's a little bit under practiced, I think he'll still go, because that's a big difference in my opinion. So yeah, I definitely think that, if he's cleared to go, he's going to go regardless if he has, 2, 3, 4 more days of practice than normal. I think he's going to go for sure.
Yeah. I mean, and definitely want to throw up, a couple of comments. Wentz season, he's an avid listener on our end too that we love. He brought up it's going to be a tough anyway, because players who have to get rehab have to be around staff. So that's close contact if a staff gets it. And he did give some clarification, Zach, for us, was that it's 5 days from the last contact. So it looks to be like what you were saying off air beforehand too, is probably a Saturday. And he threw out there, and I knew this, but I didn't know if they were doing it this year, wearing the proximity tracker that they had last year.
Yeah.
I wasn't sure if they were doing the same thing. So it sounds like what Wentz season is saying to us is that that's probably something they are still doing inside the facility with those trackers for, I would assume, everybody, or at least the unvaccinated or the assumed unvaccinated players. I don't want to assume anybody's vaccinated or unvaccinated or any of that stuff. But okay, so I'm trying to think if we've got any other. Oh, we have the other big news that we have to cover the trade today before we get into the roster breakdown that we're also excited to do, that me and Zach and Cody have probably been talking about. So what do we think? What do y'all think?
I think it was necessary, right? Like watching these preseason games, I'm not a big knee-jerk guy, but they were bad. Man, I mean, there's no other way of saying it. Those backups were not good. I mean, they just were not good enough. And they didn't look like guys who would be playing in the NFL. So for me, you get a player and you get a pick. You lose that 6th-round pick. But I think I would have to think if he contributes at all this year and he stays on this roster just as a flex, guy who can play guard, tackle, a swing tackle, I would have to say that the Colts will win on this trade when it all comes down to it. I thought before that happened, I thought Will Holden would probably hold his job just by default initially. But no, I like the trade. I think it's a good trade. I think it was necessary. And I'm not 100% convinced that they're not done. Chris Ballard loves the waiver wire. There's a few positions, O-line. I think cornerback's going to be something he's going to look at, possibly safety. So you never know. He may not be the last addition, but good trade in my opinion. Cody, what were your instant, just quick hitter reactions to the trade when you saw it today?
Yeah, I mean, low risk. Well, you're giving away a 6th-round pick, you're recouping a 7th, and you're getting a player. So, I mean, I personally, for depth standpoint, I liked it. He's a massive human being. He's like 6'7", 335 pounds or so. So he's a massive human for sure. But I was talking with one of my friends who's a Philadelphia Eagles fan. He actually has a podcast also. But he was basically saying, I said, so tell me everything I need to know about this guy. And he basically said along the lines of like, he's shown flashes of being a good player, but he'll drive you crazy sometimes. And I'm sure you guys saw it by now, but last year he played some right tackle for the Eagles and he allowed, I think, 4 sacks in one game. So I think he's more of a natural guard than an offensive tackle. And I think he kind of need that. I mean, I think he can slide into guard and be, fairly good at it. So yeah, I mean, I think it's just good for depth standpoint, especially because he can play tackle in a pinch. And you can't do much worse than your tackles were last year, that's for sure. Or last, the preseason. That's what I meant.
Yeah, I mean, I'm in agreement with you guys. I think it needed to be made. Ballard knows what he's doing when it comes to. And I think we talked about this in the offseason. Specifically, the lines. He seems to know what he's doing really, really well. I will point out we've had a Philly fan drop in. Y'all won't be happy with Matt Pryor. He was the worst O lineman on the Eagles last year, but he does have good measurables. So that was it. And then Jason David dropped in his thoughts too. The funny thing about the trade is, for real, we might only be moving back 5 or 7 spots and getting a tackle out of it. It's a late 6th for an early 7th. It's kind of a wash when it comes to it. It was a needed position. I'm okay with it. It was nice to see Colts breaking news that didn't have to do with a foot or an injury or a surgery or COVID. So that was nice. So I'll take that. So let's get to what we really want to discuss, we really want to talk about, which is the final 53-man roster reactions. Before I kind of toss it to you guys, I will say we did Cody, I know you guys did your guys' prediction over on Bring the Juice recently too, and we did ours on Monday with George Bremer. And I got to say, I felt pretty good looking over my predictions and comparing them. Felt decent about some of them, was dead wrong on some of them, like we said, but felt pretty good. Kind of, I think I texted Zach. I was like, hey, I got a couple right. So what is, I want to do this too. I want between Zach and Cody, I want y'all's initial reactions. Anybody who's in the chat, I want y'all's reactions too. We'll pop those up and we'll talk about them too. So Cody, what were your kind of initial gut knee-jerk reactions to seeing the roster when it came out, the final 53?
Yeah, I think not a ton of surprises, honestly. I think Will Holden being cut was certainly a surprise for me, and the fact that they kept, Will Fries on the roster as well. I like Will Fries, but I thought, oh, he's probably a practice squad guy week one. But I mean, he showed some flashes in the preseason. I just didn't know if it was enough to warrant a 53-man roster spot. Obviously, the Colts felt differently. And I think the biggest one for me was definitely the defensive line. The Colts kept 11 defensive linemen on their roster. That's unheard of, man. You don't keep that many guys, and especially on the interior. They kept 5 guys on the interior, which is just insane to me that they kept that many guys. Obviously, things are fluid and they'll probably change, but a lot of commitment to that defensive line for sure. Those are some of my initial reactions.
Yeah, I mean, for me, I've always thought this in my mind. It's the most grueling 24 hours in pro football because tonight you got to call your mom and dad, said I made a football team, and tomorrow when the waiver wire clears, you may not be on an NFL football team. But my instant reactions were, like Cody had said, we're pretty heavy at D-line, obviously. I think some of these injuries and just some of these players who are probably getting ready to be reverted back to that IR and all that's going to kind of level this back out. I was a little bit surprised that Williams made the team. I thought he flashed. I thought he looked good. I thought Brown was a little bit better football player personally. I thought he just had a little bit more upside. That was one that I was surprised there. As I mentioned earlier, I don't think that they're done with the cornerback position. So Marvell Tell for me is right now he's on the roster, but I'm not going to be shocked whatsoever in the next 48 hours that Marvell Tell, falls off the roster and maybe they go out there and bring in a veteran. I know that they, I think there's even news that they worked out another offensive lineman today, just to kind of Ballard loves having something in the pipeline, just something to stir up. But it was pretty status quo. It wasn't anything crazy. I think the most interesting parts to all of this 53-man roster is, who's going where? That's the questions that we don't know. Who's going to IR? Who's going, in this direction? I think once you realize, the severity of the injury of Ellinger, T.Y. is an unknown. Everybody's kind of waiting to see what they're going to do with T.Y. Hilton. Danny Pentner, it's kind of a mystery with Danny Pentner. T.J. Carey, I don't really have a good gauge on how injured he is. All of those players could really factor in to how this team is constructed moving forward. But all in all, I thought Ballard once again did a very good job putting 53 men together. And I think that we have a competitive football team. And if we can just stay healthy, knock on wood, I think we have a team that can go out there and really, really compete this year. How about you, Steven?
Yeah, so knee-jerk gut reaction. The first two things were, Desmond Patman made the team. But also, obviously, so did Ashton Doolin. So I was wrong on that one. And Rock Ya-Sing, the jersey's still alive, my man. The jersey is still alive for you, Zach. He made the team. I don't think that was a question. It's just a joke. If he hadn't made the team. And I think the D-line was maybe one of the more surprising parts because even when we did our predictions, I felt very heavy at 9. I think we had predicted 9 kind of across the board, me, you, and George. I felt very heavy at 9. So to go 11 kind of surprised me a little bit. I think we had most of it right outside of there were additional players. And even Eagles fan 09, Eagles fan 9 dropped in. Does keeping 11 guys on the D line spell concern at all? Seems like a wasteful use of resources. It's a good question. It's a heavy spot. Does it speak concern or does it speak that there was that much depth and that much talent? What do y'all think?
I think that yes, we were very deep at that position, but B, I would be absolutely shocked if we go into this season and have 11 guys rostered on the defensive line. I think this was more about, I think Ballard took advantage of a really bad situation, right? We've got all these guys on the COVID exempt list right now. So really, so as these guys come back and whatever wave that they come back in, you're going to get Pascal back, you'll get Kelly back, you'll get Carson Wentz back. Some of these guys are going to have to go somewhere because they're going to get, they're going to get their spot back when it all comes down to it. I think I would be shocked if at least one of those defensive linemen did not fall off. For me, I probably would lean to Stallworth if I had to say one guy falls off there. I thought Rochelle played good, actually. I didn't predict him to make it. I thought he was my hardest cut, but I thought he really played well. Yeah, Steven, I see you pointing at yourself, man. Yeah, you did pick him to make it.
It was a coin flip. Let's be honest, man.
I think his flexibility to slide on the inside is what saved him and what probably gave him his job, honestly. I don't think they vision him as much on the out as the inside. He can, in a pinch, in an injury situation, he could kind of go in there and do that. So, yeah, that being said, that's probably the one position I think that probably will change the most before we go into the actual week one up there against Seattle.
Mm-hmm. Cody, what about you, man?
Yeah, I think at most you keep 10. That's even a lot, honestly. But I do think it would be Williams. I don't think it'd be Stallworth because he's putting in some good minutes for you. I think it'd be Williams. I like him, but maybe you can get him on the practice squad a lot easier than you could get a Taylor Stallworth. So, yeah, it's going to be certainly interesting when some of these guys return, and if any other guys are placed on IR or anything like that, it'll obviously change the way the roster flows a little bit. But as of right now, yeah, it's a lot on the defensive line, but it's probably the deepest position, I'm going to be honest, on this team. You got so many former second-round picks. You got guys that on the interior that you really like. So I understand why Ballard wanted to keep a lot more, because this group is super talented and super deep.
Yeah, I mean, and as we're talking, I mean, we're getting a ton of feedback from you guys, and I want to make sure, as always, we try to touch on everybody. And Jason's in here. He has a couple of great points. One, Cody, he gives you a little shout out. He knows you like dueling, so he gave you a little shout to that. But he brings a great point too of I don't know about Ty, but Ellinger IR, Ty could go on the short term IR. That's going to open up some spots, so it's going to be interesting to see what happens there. I mean, and then he brings up Will Fries possibly going to the practice squad when Kelly comes back. So I mean, there's a lot of it's a final 53-man roster in quotations because it's very, very fluid. Also want to make sure there's our boy Vinny, day one listener. Love Vinny. Always have to give him a shout out. I mean, yeah, it's so fluid. With the 11, it's kind of funny to go chalk. I mean, I agree. There's no way in my mind they keep that many going into the season, but I also don't look at it as like this spell of doom. I think you had a lot of depth at the position, and you had the ability to carry those because of the COVID list, because of injuries. I mean, we do know officially, I think something we had talked to George about, we do know officially that Dio is on the exempt, what is it? The non-football injury list, which means he can't come back until at least week 8, can start practicing after week 6. Is that right?
That's exactly right.
So we know that's there. Okay, before I go any further, Adam keeps hounding me. Adam, I see you, man. I'll give you your shout out. Okay. he keeps dropping in. But I mean, there's just so much fluidity to it that it's going to be probably the more interesting was not today. It'll be over the next several days more than anything on what transpires. Where does TY go? Where does everybody kind of drop? So keeping with the 53-man, the 53, I'm curious, and everyone who's in the chat, love you guys. Make sure if you're not subscribed, please subscribe. Keep them coming. We're going to try to hit on everything you guys are asking too. Is what was kind of the least surprised you were to see? And I mean, let's not say Carson Wentz. We're better than that. And what was the most surprised player you actually saw make the roster that you were shocked that you saw that name come across? Cody, what do you think, man?
Yeah, here, let me pull up the roster here. So least surprised, I'll go more of a position group than a specific player. I mean, I think I was least surprised by the running backs, honestly. I mean, we kind of knew, I didn't have any doubt that all 4 of those guys were going to be on the roster. I mean, you could say the same about quarterback too. I think I was slightly more surprised at quarterback because I just didn't know if they were going to either keep Ellinger because of the injury, place him on something, but running back, it was pretty cut and dry for me. And probably the most surprised I was of any player, I mean, I think it has to be Williams. I think it definitely does. I was not expecting him to make the final 53 man. I really wasn't. I was expecting either Andrew Brown or them to just keep 4 defensive tackles, or less. So yeah, I mean that for me is definitely probably the player I least expected to make the roster, who right now is.
Yeah, I think for me, I hate to piggyback, but Williams for sure was the shocker. He was the one that kind of stood out to me. I didn't see him making this team. I did think he had a pretty good camp, and I did think he looked good in his action in preseason. Just so I can kind of go in a different direction that Cody went. Running back, obviously, linebacker for me too was pretty set in stone. I thought the linebackers who made this roster were expected to make this roster for various reasons. Obviously, we have the stars that headline it, but also we have those core special teamers on the back end. So that was pretty easy. I don't think that was a decision that Chris and Frank were sitting in there taking too long to think about. I think they wrote those guys down in there and it was just done, settled. But yeah, Williams. And I'll tell you another one. Marvell Tell. I didn't think Marvell Tell was going to make this football team. And I still think that he eventually will be waived when it's all said and done. I didn't like his body language in the third preseason game. I just thought he played like a guy who was just over it. He just didn't have a really good energy about him. Even Sean Davis, who got cut, I don't think he played well, and I think he should have gotten cut. He was at least out there trying to make plays, fighting for that job. I didn't feel like Marvell Tell. I never got that sense from Tell that he was going, he was fighting for that job. He was just kind of a guy that was out there. Tons of potential. He's totally a Chris Ballard guy. Long, athletic, physical, but it just didn't come together. I don't know if that's because he took a season off or what the case was, but that was the one guy for me. Where you at with it, Steven? So don't copy off me and Cody either. Be original.
I'm not. I try to be original, After our 53-man prediction, you and George kind of had me convinced of the tight end room with the pickup, and I'm trying to remember his name because for some reason it is completely escaping me who they went and they picked up.
Kahale Warring?
Yes. Yeah. Was that you picked him up several days before, and y'all had me convinced he was making the team. And so when I looked down, and my pick was 3, and I feel good about that, but at the same time, you and George kind of had me convinced, why do you pick somebody up and then cut them, 2 days later? So that kind of surprised me. Sean Davis surprised me because I had him I was one of the few. I did have him making the roster. So that kind of surprised me. The non-surprise, and it sounds funny, is kind of how it broke in the receiver room. There was so much debate over who the 6th receiver was going to be. And you hate this, but like T.Y. getting hurt and what's going to happen with him opened it up to where the debate was kind of null and void. They brought both. But, just to also the Stroud making the roster, let's not understate this. This is a really late round pick that, we talked about it on the show on on Sunday, was George talking to us in the very beginning about this guy. And I think I made a joke that he was the most intriguing prospect in the draft to me at the time. But I also said, don't go buy a number 17 jerseys. Go buy your 17 jerseys. He's on the team. He's not going anywhere. So, let's not get like that turned around. That's just a Ballard gem. And as I'm talking, people are just flooding in here. So bear with me, you guys, as we pop up people who have kind of jumped in here, because I'm just trying to. So, Inside the Horseshoe podcast says, what's up? And kind of the surprise for them was, I'm gonna say that it was Kafusi. And he looked good. That was a surprise to him. Jason David talked about kind of the 11D linemen. Here's a great one. Zach, this is a question for you. And Cody, feel free to chime in too, is that if you cut Tell, do you look at Trufant?
I don't know. Chris Ballard doesn't tend to go with older guys. Maybe he does. For me, I would love to have a veteran presence because I'm not sold on any cornerback, opposite of Kenny Moore and Xavier Rhodes right now. Maybe I have PTSD of Rocky Yassin getting beat against the Lions on that red zone. That man. I mean,
It all comes back to Rock.
I mean, he just got torched on that play. But the thing is, Steven, those are plays against guys who are not, number one starters, and he's just getting obliterated. Those are the plays that really make it hard for a coach to believe in somebody being out there all the time. I think that's why TJ Carey beat him out at the end of the season, for lack of a better term. I think
Right.
TJ Carey just took over the job because Rock was not reliable. I mean, not just with the pass interferences, but you just couldn't count on him duplicating things. He'd come out and have one really good play, and then the next two would be really poor. You just couldn't get any consistency going with Rock. So we'll see at the cornerback. I got a real quick question for you and Cody that just kind of popped in my mind. So if Ehlinger goes to IR, do we roll with two quarterbacks? Or are we going to go out and pick up a veteran off the waiver wire? Cody, you go first.
Ooh, I'm debating this.
I know.
Yeah, it's a big if because I don't think they will necessarily. But yeah, I think if they were to, probably would. That'd probably be the best bet, especially with Wentz still returning from his injury. I think you'd rather play it safe and not risk potentially having one quarterback healthy, right, in a game. So yeah, I think they would. I think they would go look somewhere else. But, I don't think Ehlinger necessarily will. But, if that was the case, yeah, I think so.
Yeah, I don't think they roll with two if he goes to IR. I think, and Zach, you've been pretty bullish with it too, is the veteran. I think you probably have to have some sort of veteran because Eason has never played an actual snap until this preseason in the NFL, and he had been not played so long. Who that is, I have no idea. I think we could rule out a Nick Foles pretty quickly, but that wouldn't be happening. Really quickly too, Rondo _Uno, he runs the Say It Again Colts beat. He chimed in real quick. Trufant asked to be released to be with his ailing father. He's not playing anytime soon. So that question about if we would go after him, there's your response to that. I mean, and just trying to catch up with you guys, man. I mean, really quickly too. My wife apparently, shout out to my wife, the second first lady of No Horsing chiming in tonight. Devin brings up, should the Colts go after Derek Singletary Jr.? I'm trying to remember who that is. Where he's at. Why am I spacing on that? What do y'all think? What I think?
I don't know. I think there's probably several players that Ballard's got on the bucket list. But look, you've also, because we were a playoff team, you've got to win those waiver, claims. You can go out for anybody that you want to in the world, but if any player is attractive, you got to think those bottom 10 teams are going to get the first dibs on them. So I would be surprised if not one person does not get claimed by the Indianapolis Colts on the waiver wire. I don't know how many he's going to get. That's going to be something kind of interesting to find. I guess 4:00 tomorrow. It's a 24-hour waiver. So, I mean, after 4:00 tomorrow, something should leak if we claimed anybody to see if we went out there. I'm a little bit surprised, I guess, going back towards the question earlier. I thought we would carry 4 tight ends as well this year because Frank Reich loves those double tight end sets, but it sounds like that's a position where he was willing to just say, hey, we're going to stick with these 3 in order to have more talent at other groups. And there's going to be several players on our football team, if they don't get picked up, that we're going to throw right back on. A Cody Felger favorite, Deion Jackson's probably going to be on our practice squad if he doesn't make it through, and he should be. I mean, he proved in that game when he got his run. I always thought Jackson was better than LeMay because of that run. That's one element that Jackson has that I felt like LeMay really didn't have, that next gear. That's why they paid him so much money, as an undrafted free agent to come in and check him out. He'll definitely be there. Tariq Black, I think, will be a guy. You mentioned Kafusi early, could be a guy. Bolton, who had the nice interception, I think that's a guy that they might want to bring back to the practice squad. And I think they can go with 16 this year, like a really large expanded practice squad because of COVID. So lots of these guys who are on the fringe, look for them to stick. That's the way I feel anyways.
Yeah. I agree.
Yeah, I would agree. Yeah, Cody, go ahead, man.
No, you're good. No, I echo everything that Zach just said for sure. I think they brings up that good point. Yeah, that there's going to be a lot of these guys who are definitely hanging around and, will be hopefully making the practice squad. Mentioned a couple of those guys that I think had really good preseasons. It's tough when you have to make these cuts, man. And you like these players. They're just like, we just can't keep you on our active roster. So I'm hoping a lot of these guys don't get claimed and that, that we can stash them on the practice squad. So you feel a little bit better. Say one of your positions goes down, you feel a little bit better about, okay, some of these practice squad guys, they performed, So yeah, I think that's something you're definitely excited about, that some of these young guys have shown out. And even if they're not on the active 53, like, you feel good if you need to call them up.
So the only thing is, I was trying to sit here as he mentioned Stingley Jr. and I was like, man, the name sounds so familiar to me. And I'm trying to think of it. So my only question, that's yeah. I mean, Jason points out that's next year's draft. That's potentially the number one corner coming out in the next year's draft. God willing, the Colts are in no position to take him because he's going to go pretty high. I'm dumbfounded by the amount of interaction that we're getting, and I'm trying to play catch up as I go through here too. I mean, another great question inside the Horseshoe podcast about the COVID situation and having 3 quarterbacks, but also, I feel like one of the other questions that kind of came across was, I'll find it here in a minute, but I'll paraphrase, was with us having Carson and us having Kelly and Pascal on there right now, who do we think? You're gonna have to cut some players probably, potentially. What's it gonna look like when they start to come back?
I'll just hop in there. I think personally one of the reasons that they kept Chris Williams on this team was because it kind of protected him from going to that initial round of waivers because he did play well. We talked about it so much, and I hate to just beat a dead horse, but it would just blow my mind for them to have 11 linemen. It's just unnecessary. You're going to have 11 linemen, and maybe 2 of those guys aren't even going to dress. I mean, like that's kind of an excess, especially when you have other areas of need. Talk about maybe wanting to bring a 3rd quarterback in there with the COVID rules and everything. I would say Williams, I could see going. I could see Marvell Tell possibly going. Will Freeze, maybe they like him. I don't. I think Freeze to me always felt more like a practice squad guy on this team. I don't think he felt to me like a starter. Maybe they see something. I don't know. But those are just for me. Those would be 3 guys that I would be looking at to say, hey, if they've got to get rid of somebody, Williams, Tell, and Freeze would probably be the first 3 that I would look at.
I would throw in probably one of your receivers as well, because if Pascal comes back, as much as it sucks, probably Patman to the practice squad. And it's hard. I know. What are you going to do? You're going to cut Strawn? You're not going to do that.
Oh, God, no.
And Ashton doing special teams. So it's just that's unfortunately how it goes. Yeah, I think those are 4 guys that I think certainly would be probably the first ones to go to the practice squad, but it does suck for sure.
I was going to say, as you guys are saying this too, this might be one of my favorite comments that has come in from Wentz season right now, is that as of right now, we only have 1 quarterback who's going to practice tomorrow. And there's nothing we can really do about that. So Jacob, you're getting all the reps, man, all of them tomorrow. And then he also drops in a great question too. Does the fact we have a lot of big body receivers now, which is different for us, do we think that played into a factor of the keeping of the 3 tight ends? You had more big body guys. So what do y'all think?
Yeah, I mean, maybe so. Maybe they just couldn't find anybody they liked. I thought Farrod Green played pretty well. I thought maybe there was a chance he would sneak in on this team. Maybe that's the way that they go. I wouldn't be surprised once everything settles out, they have a healthy roster, non-COVID, non-everything. Maybe that they take a stab at bringing that 4th guy in there. They've always in the past kind of like that tight end / H-back, they could go back there and do a little bit of, blocking, crack blocking on the edges for them. Maybe so. I mean, you're really kind of crowded at the wide receiver group because, Hines is almost like a hybrid. He's a running back, but he's such a threat in the receiving game. I mean, you've got so many guys on this football team to catch the football and just so many passes to go around. So I think they're set at wide receiver regardless. I want to say it on the record. I've said it many times. I agree with Cody. I think they should keep Doolin over Patman. I know I am going to get lots of flack for that, but at the end of the day, your sixth wide receiver can either not dress and not play, or he can affect the football game as a gunner. And I think he's a really good special teams player. And if he just makes 3, 4, 5 really big plays this year that cause your team to win football games, then for me, it's well worth having him as the 6th guy. I love Patman. I think Patman's got a lot of potential. We probably got lucky with Patman here, because had he went on this initial waiver wire, I'm not sure that Patman would have cleared waivers. I think tomorrow Desmond Patman would have been playing for another NFL football team, if I'm being 100% honest. But you had to pick between him and Strawn, and I think Strawn just has a little bit more potential, a little more to like, and he's the most unique because he just offers something that I don't think that you have. I think in Pascal and Patman, you have a lot of the same, right? But with Pascal, you know what you got. You know, he's been consistent. He's been solid. He's such a good blocker. And Patman is – I don't know if you watched the 3rd preseason game. He was not good on special teams at all. So, I mean, that's the tiebreaker for me. Anyways, rant over.
Yeah, I do kind of think, going back to the question about 3 tight ends, I just think you have more talent other places, personally. I think you have more talent at wide receiver, more talent on the D-line. And that's not a shot at Farrah Green or whatever his other name, the other guy's name is, we already said his name. I'm just totally blanking as well. But like, who would you rather have? Would you rather have a Doolin or a Strawn or a Patman, or would you rather have a Farrah Green? I mean, I think we would all say those other guys. So I think that's a valid point as well.
So here's a question. I'm going to piggyback on this one, because it's kind of percolated in my head as we're talking about receivers, because that was such a hot topic coming into here. And I'm going to get to y'all's comments. Trust me, I promise. I've been on record. Zach knows, Cody knows. I'm the Patman, beat the drum, all that. I was willing to cut Ashton Doolin. I still am. But my question for you guys too is, we talk about them having similar roles. After this year, T.Y.'s potentially gone. Pascal's potentially gone. In my mind, Ballard is always thinking 3 steps ahead, right? He's always, because I think he even talks with the cap. I think, what is it? Is it in 3-year chunks, or it's 3 or 4 year chunks is what he looks at. My question is he keeping Patman around because does he potentially think, he's going to have the choice with T.Y. and I don't know with Pascal, but I would rather have Patman on the team as a possible replacement for one of those players than Doolin, because at the same time, I'm finding it right here. Jason popped up, and this is an interesting fact. Doolin only had 4 solo tackles last year, 3 assists. 4 other Colts players had more tackles on special teams. That's why I go with Patman. He's a better receiver.
Well, special teams isn't just about tackles, though.
That's true. Pinning the ball down, that's true.
That's not his mojo. His mojo is downing it within the 5-yard line, and he's great at that. So,
well, and a great point I heard was, and this was a great point for Doolin. So I don't want to get. I support whatever players are on the team. I'm not trying to get anybody fired from the team. Is Rigoberto as good as he is if Doolin's not downing the punts? Can he put them there? It's a great question. Is Rigoberto just that good, which he is really, really good, but is he still as good if he loses a gunner who can down the ball inside the 5?
Yeah, I'm going to beat this drum till it's dead. I think Doolin is very, very valuable to our football team. And if you watched a lot of those games last year, where other teams would start on the field, man, we would pin those guys back consistently, and it was because of a guy like Doolin, man. He's just Cody brings up an amazing point. It's not a stat that you track, right? Like, how many times did you down something inside the 10-yard line? You don't have really a true stat for that. But he does it all the time. He's just so good at that, and it's such a unique talent. There's only so many people that have that rare talent, and he wants to be great at that. You know what I mean? Like I think he takes so much pride, and that's what kept him in the NFL, is the fact that he has this ability that the people, i.e., Patman he's going against, he knows that's his edge. And we can debate that. I mean, I think Patman's a fine receiver. I really do. And I think on a lot of football teams, Patman makes it in the NFL. I just think we are crowded. And, I get the argument from maybe, later in the season, next year, looking down the road, you would want a guy who's a really nice prospect. But I think you've got enough there. I mean, you've got Strawn, you've got Granson, who's going to be receiving tight end. You've got, I think Paris Campbell, if he can stay healthy. You've got Michael Pittman Jr. I think you just got to live with it. I think at the end of the day, there's not a great answer, but I think you just got to live with it, and you go with the guy who helps on special teams.
Yeah. The question is, how long is T.Y. going to be out? Because if he's going to be out for a long time, like if it's half the season, then they better put him on IR now, because if you do, then you can keep both of these guys and it doesn't matter. Right. But like if T.Y. is only going to miss 3-4 games, then okay, you have a different conversation then. So it really is going to depend, I think, on the severity of T.Y. Hilton's injury, how long he's out, because I think if he's out more of that 3 to 4 weeks or maybe even earlier, I don't know how long it's going to be. I don't think the Colts necessarily know how long it's going to be, but if it's around that time, I would be more inclined to say the Colts would, cut Patman than they would if, obviously if they don't have to.
Yeah, I mean, and that seems to be kind of what everyone is saying too. I mean, we've got it in here already that it really is. It's dependent. If T.Y. is going to miss 6 to 8 games, like you said, Cody, and Wentz season chimed in with this too, is that you're gonna put him on IR. You're gonna keep him. You're gonna keep both these guys. It's kind of all null and void at that point, and no one really knows what's going on with T.Y. anyway. I know I talked about it, and we all kind of probably have the same feeling. Is the idea of a neck just scares the bejesus out of me. I don't. Zach, you said I listened back, flashbacks to Peyton Manning, or just flashbacks to Michael Irvin, whoever it is. Necks are so serious that I don't know what to play of it. So I don't know what that's going to look like 24 hours from now, 48 hours from now when they decide what to do. But it's going to greatly affect what they do. I mean, receiver was a hot topic coming into today. I'm okay with both. I mean, if we can keep them both, that's great. It'll be interesting to see what happens. He chimed in. Patman's very similar to Pittman. He's a little bigger. There was a lot of talk in the very beginning. I don't know if I'm mistaken, but I feel like there was talk of, would you move him to tight end because of his size? So, those are very separate. Pittman, I guess, Zach, me and you had talked that Pittman, we thought he would slowly transition to the one this season. That's probably going to happen a little quicker now with T.Y. being out.
Well, he is the one, right? Mm-hmm. It's just that simple, whether he wants to be the one or not. I think the debate was a little bit on Twitter the other day, and I kind of got into a nice, healthy conversation, was who's the number 2. And for me, I said right now I think Zach Pascal's the number 2, and I justified that with the fact that he's just been so consistent. He's a veteran presence. Be hard for me to see, Paris Campbell initially come out there and be the number 2. Now, does Paris Campbell have a higher ceiling? Absolutely. There's no question about it. But Paris has just got to be on the field. He's got to play. He's got to be healthy. He provides a different element than really any of our other wide receivers. And now you don't have that typical vertical threat, right? With T.Y. just taking the top off. You don't have that typical threat. So does Paris Campbell kind of take that role over? We don't want to ever get in a situation where everybody's just sitting on all of those underneath routes, because we have so many, you mentioned earlier, we have so many big body wide receivers who can just almost kind of jump ball, bully you around. But when it comes to it, I think Paris adds that special element. He can really take off and leave you. He's the one guy who makes some of those freak plays. And, you saw a little bit of it in the preseason. I don't think he got a chance to play a whole lot just because they were very conscientious. Frank Reich took a stance on being healthy and resting his veterans. But that being said, I mean, to go back to answer the question about Patman playing tight end, I don't think there's ever a chance. He's an NFL wide receiver. He's good enough to play in the NFL. And depending on, Cody had made a great point, we just don't know with the TY injury. The TY injury is going to settle everything, right? Because if he goes to IR, I mean, Patman plays on this team, and it's that simple. We'll worry about this. I guess it would be week 8. But if he goes on that short term, I think they can designate a few people on that short term, that 3-week IR where you can just kind of come right back early. That's the best understanding that I've gotten to this point. Everything's murky when it comes to that. But if he's more of a short-term guy, then you maybe have to make a little bit different decision.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Yeah. So, I mean, as we're going, really quickly, I'm always, because the chat is like exploding, which is so much fun. Really quickly, too. Shout out Colt before Lawrence jumping on. If you guys don't get a chance, if you missed his live stream because you're on us, well, we love you for that. But go back and watch his. Lawrence does a great job. Thank you, Lawrence, for jumping in. We're going to get to what you said, too. Shout out to Colts loyalists. That brings up what I was going to say. Please make sure in the middle of this that you guys are hitting that subscribe button. He says it best. He says what we say, which is big Q style. Make sure you do that thing with that subscribe button. So you don't miss any of this. But at the same time, I mean, here's one for you guys. Nollville too. Really surprised we cut Brown. He looked really good in the middle. I know that's something you guys brought up earlier. I mean, it is. It kind of, I think it surprised a lot of people. What do you, reasoning, thoughts? What do you guys think?
Just quick hitter. Cody, would you have kept Brown over Williams?
I probably would have, personally. Yeah. But I thought they both had good preseasons, so it was kind of like up in the air. And I don't think necessarily either of them will be on the roster, for a long, long time. I don't think they were supposed to. So, yeah.
What about you, Steven? Did you have a preference on one of those two?
Not particularly. I'm trying to remember. I know I didn't have Brown making the team.
Yeah.
I feel as if I didn't have either one when we broke down.
I definitely didn't have Williams.
I think those were my two.
Yeah, I definitely did not have Williams. I think one thing too to bring up, Eric Fisher is something we haven't talked about on this podcast and I haven't talked about for a while, but that's still in limbo. We just don't know when he's going to come back and how he's going to play into this offensive line depth either. I think seems like he's on a road to recovery that's a little bit faster than we all anticipated. I really think that he's going inside that first month. I don't know which week it would be. I think he has a chance to play inside that first month of the season. That's pretty impressive. He and Dio, I think, had the injury the exact same day. And he's come back and really, he's rehabbed. He's done well. He's already been doing some off the field work. How does this COVID, he has COVID, I guess. And how does that play into his situation as far as that goes? But, interested to think, how long do you guys think that Eric Fisher's going to be out? Do you have any gauge, any idea how many games he misses this year?
I mean, I've always said, I think me and you, you've been kind of on the front end this entire offseason once we signed him. I've kind of been in the middle. I think at one point I thought half the season. I think that's completely not realistic at this point. 4 games, if I'm guessing, 3 to 4. I feel like if I asked you, you might say 2. But I feel like that's kind of where you've set a lot of the time too. But 3 or 4 potentially. But I mean, he's definitely, and George talked about it on our show on Sunday too, is that him and Dio got injured on the same day, and they are very much on different trajectories right now. Dio is out for 8 weeks. Like he's not playing, and I think George said he feels about a month behind Fisher. I'll go 3. I'll go in between 3. Cody, what do you think?
I was going to say I think he's back by week 4. I think we often forget just because he's activated doesn't mean he's going to play. He needs some time to practice and get back into football shape and things like that, and just get acclimated with this offensive line a little bit. I think, yeah, especially with being on the COVID list as well, I think that pushes it back a little bit. I was probably more of the week 3, week 2, week 3, but I think maybe it pushes it back a week or 2. just because. And I think the Colts will be overly cautious with him, as they should. I think week 4, him being back is pretty realistic in my mind.
Yeah, man. I mean, it's going to be interesting to see, these injuries and COVID and everything is going to be so critical. And I really feel like in the next week, all these pieces of the puzzle are going to kind of start coming together, and you're going to know what this football team is going to look like a whole lot more as far as that goes. But all in all, I mean, I can't really complain about this 53. I think it's a pretty good 53. I think they've done a really good job of putting a lot of, young talent. I might like to see a veteran cornerback presence out there. Another guy that we really haven't mentioned was, Shashiri. I thought he had a really, really good camp. I thought he played pretty well in the preseason, and cool to see a guy like that, that just kind of came out of nowhere, made the football team. I'm interested to see what you two guys think. Do you think he's a cornerback, or you think he's a safety for this football team? Because I know they list him a little bit, but he seemed to play quite a bit more corner, especially late in the preseason. Do you think they're going to use him out that cornerback position, or you think they're going to use him for depth in the safety position? What do you think, Cody?
He's backup free safety for me.
Okay.
Cody's
hey, that's what I want right there.
Yeah, I mean, I think the same. I think the corner, they have players they want to see. I don't think they're going to take time away from him, from the players they want to see if they're going to progress. So I see it being kind of that backup safety role. Really quickly, we're going to kind of run down a couple of things. Lawrence is all in our chat with his predictions. So if you're on here, just try to read them, because he's dropping all sorts of different things. But I mean, one last thing before we we're kind of trying to kind of put a little bit of a bow on this thing as we talk about the 53, and you guys have been amazing with the interaction as we go through here. One of the things that someone brought up was Caden, the Colts fan, brought up thoughts on keeping 6 edge rushers. What do you guys think about that?
Yeah, a little bit surprised. I do think, and this, I know this might ruffle some feathers. I don't know, but I think Rochelle will be cut ultimately. I just think with the roster crunching, you don't need you don't need 6 guys. And Rochelle, for me, was always the odd man out here. And I think maybe if you release a defensive lineman in the interior, release Rochelle, boom, you're back down to 9. So I think that's probably what the Colts will do. But I think basically what we said with the argument of keeping 11, I think that's why they did that, was just because they like all these guys, and they want to potentially, I don't know what all we said, but yeah, I think that's why they kept that many, is just because of the reasons we already stated. But yeah, I think for sure Rochelle's probably going to be the guy that is cut first, if I'm thinking out of any of these pass rusher guys.
Yeah, I'm right there with Cody, honestly. I think it's overload, it's excess. You don't need 6 pass rushers. Now, the only way I can see Rochelle maybe finding his way on this team, if they say, hey, we're going to kick you in, you're going to play inside as a depth backup. That's a possibility if they're looking to just have him on the field. Kind of like Tyquan Lewis, how he can kick him inside, outside. And that's another guy, kind of a mystery with Tyquan Lewis. We just don't know how healthy he is. I think they're all starting to kind of get in a little bit better shape, get him back on the field. But that'll be interesting to know. But I don't think, to answer your question, Stephen, I don't think we're going to have 6 edge rushers come day one.
Yeah. So, okay. I've got to say this near the end. I'm going to do 3 different little things, and then we're going to 3 little short things as we try to finish this up. One is, if you are on here right now and we did not get to your comment, I apologize. There's so many we're trying to go. We love it. Make sure you're here next time too. If you logged on late and you missed the beginning, it's cool. We're winding up. Just wait and then jump back and watch the beginning. It'll be up for you guys right away. So, I mean, we love it. We love it. All of this. We figured this was going to be a really interesting episode with everybody kind of winding down. Second to last thing, I want to give the floor for a second to Cody, because I want to thank Cody for coming on. Cody has been an amazing help to kind of our podcast, helping us kind of get our feet under us when we came over to YouTube. He's really behind the scenes with us. He's become a good friend of mine that I'm able to call and talk with too. So if you guys don't follow him, I have no clue how you don't. because Bring the Juice is probably one of the first things that you listen to as a Colts fan. So, Cody, I want to give you a chance to kind of tell everyone. I've got all your stuff, but I want to give you a chance to tell everyone videos, where, how they follow, do everything. And if you guys don't, I'm going to be disappointed a little bit in the No Horsing family.
Well, thank you. It's humbling to hear you say that. I appreciate your friendship and, you know, the ways that we've been able to help each other for sure. But yeah, in terms of podcasts, I mean, if you're on any social media, you'll probably find us on there or listen to any podcast. We're on there. As far as social media is concerned, you can find myself on Twitter at CP Felger 55. You can find me on Facebook as well. I post Colts content on there. Bring the Juice, you can find it's a Facebook page. You could also find it on Twitter at BTJ Pod, and then the same with Instagram as well. And really, like, if you're listening on YouTube, if you're listening anywhere else, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, whatever it is, fill in the blank, you can find us on there. You just type in Bring the Juice and we'll come up, and or just type in Colts podcast on YouTube and you'll find us. So yeah, I really appreciate you having me on, man. Really appreciate it.
As always, man. I mean, and me and Zach will point out really quickly too, if you're unsure of where to find, literally go on YouTube and type Colts podcast. It is the number one thing that pops up. And it's not like one of the videos. Like, we were blessed enough, like we're up there with like the Michael Strawn video. It's the link where all you have to do is hit subscribe. So it's impossible to miss Bring the Juice. So, I mean, like I said, I wanted to thank him for coming on. Zach, I'm going to give you a minute, too, because I know here at the tail end, we like to thank everybody. We like to kind of set our goal for the week. Sure. So I'm going to pass that to you, man.
Absolutely, man. Just like you said, man, we've always been so thankful for what Cody's done for our show. Yeah, he's worked behind the scenes, but, you know, if you're a part of the Colts community, I mean, I really think, and I encourage you to go there and follow his stuff. I mean, he has great content, and really, you know, nobody really, in my opinion, and this is just my opinion, no one works harder in the Colts. Of all the content creators, I think, you know, himself and Lawrence are kind of out in the forefront. They're so diligent with what they do. And they invest a lot of time in their craft, and we all kind of, you know, model ourselves, and we're kind of, you know, looking up to those guys. They're awesome. So we're all just trying to be a part of a big family. We keep asking you to join the No Horsing family. But make sure you join Bring the Juice podcast as well. There's enough of it to go around for sure. Like, rate, review, subscribe, and interact. That's the main thing. You know, what we've always said from the very beginning, even if you don't agree with what we have to say, let us know. We'll give you your shine, man. We'll call you out. We'll let you have your voice, and let your voice be heard, because that's all we really, really want to do at the end of the day. You know, Steve and I started this and said, if one person listens and one person, you know, gets a chance to have their voice on this podcast, that was good enough for us. And we're lucky enough now that we've got several subscribers. People are listening to our podcast, and we're going for a goal of 400 subscribers on YouTube. Everything keeps going in the right direction, and that's because of you guys. So thank you so much again. And we're proud of what we're doing, and we're mostly proud just to be a part of the Colts community.
Yeah, I couldn't say it better myself, and I thought of this too at the very end before I do our normal little sign off. Yeah, I almost forgot. We have to thank our sponsors of Bet Odds Sportsbook. We have to thank Fanatics, and the newest one, which is the La Terrain watches. We'll get the promo code is Horseplay for that. I think we're still working on the promo code for Bet Odds Sportsbook, which you don't need it yet. College football comes back on Thursday. You can start betting on that. I'm not going to, if it's legal in your state. I always say that.
Pay your bills first. Pay your bills first, then bet.
That's right. Yes. Small bets. I don't bet, but you guys can. Yeah. So we end it the same way every time. I've got nothing left to say. I love you. Zach loves you. I also know that Cody does love you as well. We are out of here, you guys.